somewhere I feel that there is this whole, barrage of information online, especially because I'm talking about online as different from seeking out information through a doula or through a birth worker, because then you are going to them with questions. That's different, because then it's still led by you. I mean, with most, I would say, doulas who don't sort of hijack the process and who let you be at the center. Like, I feel that I was very lucky that way, to have Reba, to have you, that I could come up with my questions, and then our process was led through my curiosities. And that, I feel, is very different from consuming information on YouTube, where once the algorithm figures out that you're pregnant and then you're looking for this kind of content, it just bombards you with what you initially feel is, oh, this is amazing, empowering stuff, and all of that. And while it is, but just the way it's coming to you, it's unasked for. So, it's like, I like this. The way I like to think about it is, the information that's truly useful to you is the one that you are seeking, or that fills some sort of, for the lack of a better word, hole within you. So first you need to experience that hole. First you need to experience that something is missing, something I'm not clear about, I'm looking for this.
Welcome to the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that births us and transforms us. This is a space where women reclaim birth on their own terms, where deep ancient knowing meets primal courage. We talk birth, womanhood, breastfeeding, parenting, and the quiet power of choosing differently. Choosing of our own. Come as you are, leave more rooted. I'm Divya Kapoor, a childbirth educator, lactation counselor, trainee traditional midwife, and doula, disintegrating the politics of birth, one story at a time.
A primary home birth. We often hear women say, "Oh, this is my first time, so I would prefer a hospital. But for my second, I will choose a home birth." This is rooted first in fear, and that home births are essentially unsafe. Second, a trust that is yet to develop in our bodies. Hence, we expect when we would have seen better, we would be more confident. However, Krupa decided to have her first at home with a doctor in Mumbai who supports home births. We would hear from Krupa her reasons, experience, and how she feels about it now as a mother of an almost 2-year-old baby. Krupa and her husband took birth classes with me, which furthered into postpartum lactation support for a month. And about Krupa. Krupa is mum to her 20-month-old baby. Professionally, she is a trained therapist and an interdisciplinary researcher in psychology, art, and anthropology. She is based between Mumbai and Germany, where she presently teaches creative practice and anthropology to postgraduate students. Let's hear from Krupa, her experience of birthing at home.
Hi, Krupa. Welcome to the Birth Agni podcast. So good to see you after really long.
So good to see you. Thank you so much for having me, Divya.
Yeah. So, Krupa, we were talking right before we started recording. You have been one person who is very intentional about how she wants to birth. You looked at your options very keenly. You reflected upon what resonates with you as a person. You were very aware and clear about what you want to do, and you were ready to explore. And then you decided on a home birth with a doctor. And then, there's always a vision of birth we have before the experience. And then once we've lived that experience, we realize we reflect on the same experience from a newer lens. So, if you were to briefly tell us about your birth experience, of how you envisioned it before, and then after, how you felt about it, and what would you say to the listeners, to the new mums? When I say new moms, I mean pregnant women listening to this, anticipating how labor and birth would be like. So, from that place to the place you reached after, how would you share this to the women?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Divya, that's like a big question. It's like 2 years of my life when I look back now. But I do know that. So I many years ago, even before I thought of having a baby, I have a really close friend who's actually a researcher on natural birthing. I mean, that's her PhD topic. She's an anthropologist, and I remembered her discussing this topic with me, and that's how I even sort of thought about the idea of natural birth. But it was really far for me. This is like, I think, 2018, 19. So it was really far for me then, but it did seem like something really valuable to think about, because I remember her telling me that she's interested in it because birth is such a natural process, but somehow it has been medicalized in our society that, we cannot imagine a birth without not just hospitals or doctors, but everything else that goes around with it. So, hospital beds and the setup and the syringe and the medicine and so on. So, I thought that was interesting. And I remember telling her also that if ever I think of having a baby, I will definitely like ask you about what are my options. And then somehow I think that was the beginning. And then I'm also in the field of culture studies, anthropology. Like I'm a researcher and academic myself. So I've been connected to these questions of science and medicine and what are the sort of challenges in these as a system of thought, and that is now a part of our lives and we sort of take it for granted. But uh, but these are systems, right? Like they are not the only truth or the only option out there. So I would say that I was already in a space where I was thinking more critically about certain modes of thinking, which included the scientific and the medical and so on modes of thinking. So I feel I was already there, and this sort of coupled with also the fact that I have never been a big fan of either hospitals or doctors or just the sterile setup. So it's yeah, it's a space that makes me feel more anxious than relaxed, which I know will not be the case with many others. Like because I do feel that people have a different sense of safety and security when it comes to their body. And for some, I know that they feel safer in more medical environments, given their histories and trajectories. For me, that was not the case. I came to the medical system with a certain amount of, I would say, healthy suspicion, and also a sense that I want to be sort of more involved and more at the center of my journey rather than somebody else taking decisions for me. So even if we are taking decisions, I'm still sort of a conscious and active participant, and not really like somebody who's being decided for. So that was there. And not just with birth, with everything, with just going to the doctor and so on. I mean, these were things that always have been important to me. So from that space, I feel that when like we were expecting our daughter, what was important for me was to find the best possible setup where I would feel that this is my journey and I'm still at the center of this journey. Like when I say I, it's me and my partner both. And I also feel that the other thing that sort of came to me when I was pregnant was that otherwise I feel that I can be more anxious and I can think about all possible negative outcomes as a person. But somehow with the birth, I feel that I just was feeling more courageous from the beginning. Like I wanted to, of course, it's your first baby, you don't want to take any rash decision, but I wanted to be open. Like the courage was in not succumbing to fear and not thinking that there's no other option. This is the only sort of right way because my baby is going to be safe only if it's a doctor and the best doctor in Bombay and all of that. So I think I was just more open at the beginning and I wanted to explore what's available to me. And yeah, that's pretty much where I was before, yeah, before conceiving. And then the whole journey, really, the I would say from the second trimester onwards until birth, well, I will not say that I had planned for it. I mean, I just went along with some curiosities and I met people along the way, you being one, and, Reba being another, and another. I've like a whole host of friends like Sanjana and so many other who really, really, helped me. I remember Nimisha, so many people I spoke to, like amazing women who I just met along the way, and they had all these different stories. And then, yeah, I mean, it was what it was, and then it happened to be, like you already mentioned, it was a home birth for us. At the end, we sort of arrived at the decision only much later. It was not like I wanted to go for a home birth from the beginning. And yeah, I mean, when I look back now, I think it was definitely one of the best decisions of my life, like in terms of like, because especially because I feel that like important moments in life, they, like, it's when you transition from one stage to other or one role to other, and they are always these high stress moments, and there's so much at stake. It's like marriage, birth, and like just big things in life. There's so much at stake, and it's so easy, and not just easy, it's natural to feel that pressure and want to go for a safer route. And we've been told somehow that the safest route is in a hospital and in a clinical setup and with people around you. And over the course of my pregnancy and talking to these amazing women, also listening to many stories and podcasts myself, like through yours and through many others, I realized that there are multiple options, and I need to choose what is right for me. It's not about the best option for everybody. Home birth may not be the best option for everybody. I would definitely say that. But we need to choose what is the best for us, given where we are in life and the direction we want to take for ourselves. Yeah.
So, Kripa, that experience and after, if you were to go back and tell the Krupa through pregnancy with the little anxieties and worries that we all have fears. I had fears before my home birth. I sometimes had to journal and write down, okay, what is it that I'm really looking at? Why am I anxious right now? Why I'm not able to sleep? When I'm contemplating my decision. So, when you look back, at that Krupa and after the fact, and if you do you think you'd like to tell her something after you've had that experience? Yeah, if there's something you could tell her.
I do feel like, I think, like a lot of first time moms, I also stressed a lot, and especially in the middle of the pregnancy, I would say around month 6 to 8, when I was in the process of really deciding, is when you're exploring options, and you realize that time is moving and you need to arrive at a decision, but then you still, I mean, it comes when it comes, right? So you're also taking your time to figure and talk to people. And I will not say that I would do it differently, because obviously it's your first time, you don't know what it is. And I feel like a lot of that anxiety is normal. And it depends on your personality before you became a mother, also. And it depends on so many things before you became a mother. Like, the one thing I feel is that a lot of the content and stuff that I was reading and sort of, people end up consuming around maternal health and so on, it kind of puts the mother in this one sort of a cubicle. Now you're a mom and now you need to whatever, do yoga to relax, or do this for that, or whatever. Like, all the advice basically separates the woman in some way from the life that she's had before. And I feel that I mean, I don't think that works. Like, you are not a different person just because you conceive, right? You're the same person. Your anxieties will be the same. Your concerns will be the same. The way you respond to things is going to be the same. So, if in general music does not calm you, and then you cannot be in your labor listening to playlists hoping to calm down, like, it doesn't work. So, these are all like band aid solutions. I feel like they don't really work. I mean, what works is, I personally feel that an awareness of who you are as a person, and it's more, I feel, as, I mean, if you believe in spiritualism of whatever kind, I feel that it's that kind of inner work. And that is what works, because then you are not pulling yourself out of the life experiences that you've had until then, but you're working with it, because you're arriving at the moment of birth with whatever years of life that you have lived. And that is what is going to help you decide how you approach this next transition or next big step. So, yeah, I feel like I don't think I could have been very different looking back. But yes, now when I look back, I know that a lot of that anxiety and a lot of that stress about what to do was normal. And that's what I think I can tell to anyone who's expecting that, it's normal. Like, whatever, however you respond is normal, because this is who you are.
Such a beautiful way of summing it all up, Krupa. I absolutely love this. And the fact that you go in just the way you are. So, like those band aid, I mean, I love the way you framed it all. And it often happens that, people come up looking for birth classes, finding ways to breathe, finding ways to move, finding, the perfect, like you're saying, the perfect playlist that will help them. A lot of the times, what get left behind is contemplating on what they really want. Everything has a risk, so how much risk are they willing to take? And it's absolutely okay if you don't want to take so much risk. It's absolutely okay if your heart and inner calling takes you somewhere. And yeah, and love that in so many ways, because that is somewhere is deeply lacking even with birth education. So so in terms of your preparation, Kripa, you prepared with Reba, you did a lot of work, she was your doula. And throughout this journey, you, of course, that contemplating the question, home birth is an option, how do I go about it? And I remember there were two doctors with you, and one of them had something, one of them said something, and then you were like, okay, I don't align with this one, I align with the other one. So if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. So all those things, all those little areas where you did that inner work, like you as a couple. Yeah, if you could, you know, bring up a couple of anecdotes for our listeners to see what that work looks like.
So, yes, I think I was really, I would say I was really lucky also, because I feel like I found a lot of people who added so much value to my entire journey during the pregnancy, and Reba and you definitely, and also Sanjana being my friend, she was like always around, and just so many more people. Like, I spoke to so many women, new women, moms that I met along the way, and many of them I've continued to be in touch with, and I think they've all added some insight or some nuance to wherever I was at that point in life. And even the doctors, I mean, I feel like I was well, obviously the experience will depend on the immediate like circumstances and so on and so forth, but I think what's important for me was that both of these were women who also identified with the idea of birth in a way that was important to me. So I feel that overall, like, it really worked for me to have all these really amazing women in my team, and who were uh, sort of giving me these different insights while allowing me, and to sort of to make my own decisions and not like over advising. But if I can think of a few like anecdotes, so one I know, and I'm going to, I feel that one of the most important things is there was a point when I was consuming a lot of online Instagram stuff, and there is a lot of seemingly empowering and quite good stuff as well. Like, I mean, I would not say that it has not helped me. It has definitely helped me think in a particular direction, and I'm sure a lot of it comes from a very good place, and people wanting to share and so on and so forth. However, I know that there was a point, I think around my final trimester, when I just decided that I'm going to unsubscribe from all the amazing channels that I have sort of logged onto and subscribed, and whose information and ideas I'm consuming. Because it felt like I was consuming too much of other people's ideas, even though brilliant ideas, they were other people's ideas, and it was clouding my mind too much, to the extent that I feel like I was not able to know whether this is something what I want, and it really aligns with the person that I am and I have been all these years of my life, or is it something that I am now believing because I've heard, all these little reels and all which talk about it. Uh, and I feel that that was one of the most helpful things I could have done for myself, because somewhere I feel that there is this whole barrage of information online, especially because I'm talking about online as different from seeking out information through a doula or through a birth worker, because then you are going to them with questions. that's different, because then it's still led by you. I mean, with most, I would say, doulas who don't sort of hijack the process and who let you be at the center. Like, I feel that I was very lucky that way, to have Reba, to have you, that I could come up with my questions, and then our process was led through my curiosities. And that, I feel, is very different from consuming information on YouTube, where once the algorithm figures out that you're pregnant and then you're looking for this kind of content, it just bombards you with what you initially feel is, oh, this is amazing, empowering stuff, and all of that. And while it is, but just the way it's coming to you, it's unasked for. So, it's like, I like this. The way I like to think about it is, the information that's truly useful to you is the one that you are seeking, or that fills some sort of, for the lack of a better word, hole within you. So first you need to experience that hole. First you need to experience that something is missing, something I'm not clear about. I'm looking for this. Until I am in touch with my own questions and my own curiosities, just this barrage of information is not going to help, because I don't know what's for me. Like, what's really needed for me is that precise bit of the puzzle that solves the gap that's within me. And in that sense, I feel it was very important for me to shut out that noise and then truly seek out information through trusted people, to people I know, whose not just information I trusted, but I trusted them as people. I had seen them apply the things they talk about in their lives, and that mattered to me. That they were not just giving advice, they were living by certain ideas, and that's where I could find my missing piece of the puzzle. And that, I feel, was really important. It was, and I would say it was inner work for us, to shut out the noise and look at what is missing for us. And that is what also helped us arrive at what was the right way of birthing, or space for birthing, or the right team for birthing for us. That's what I feel.
Yeah, yeah. Self directed birth. We often speak about this in our community of birth workers that, there's a lot of influence sometimes because we have a lot of power as coaches on the couple. And it's very easy for us to influence with our ideas of what feels right to us. And there is no right or wrong way to birth. Definitely, there is physiology which plays an upper hand. But then again, it's such an individual story for a person. For somebody who feels extremely, very strongly pushed towards hospital, that may be right for them. Probably their situation, it is right for them. And for somebody, when they are with everything around them, with all the questions, like you said, they are being directed towards the home birth, they will be eventually reaching where they need to, if they keep seeking the right, seeking their curiosity, like following their curiosity. So to all the listeners, I know this can be very nuanced, but it's very important to be self directed for everybody, even for us, to know that where we enter into our clients' space and kind of have that influence, because we don't want your story to be our story, because it's not. And we may actually be wrongly guiding you if we push you in a direction that we believe in. So, yeah, Krupa, you then decided to have a home birth, and then Reba was there. She came in. Right, you told me Reba came in right a few weeks before, and like, if not weeks, maybe a few days before, and she was there, and then your labor began. And if I could ask you, in your case, I remember if yours was a specific condition where it wasn't high risk. I think we discussed with you, like thalassemia, like minor thalassemia. It wasn't high risk, but to the doctors, it seemed high risk. And when you arrived at a decision to have a home birth, you did have to negotiate with the doctors. So that sort of certainty, yeah, how did you then negotiate with the doctors, if you'd be happy to share that? And yeah.
It was quite different. I will say that. I have the thalassemia minor gene, and I've had it. I mean, it's a gene, so I've had it since childhood. But I would, in fact, say that, and this is where I would credit the doctor who like who we worked with, that she never made a big deal about it. And in fact, it was all these years of me being a part of the clinical system where I thought thalassemia was a huge deal, because I had grown up, with initially taking iron tablets only to realize ki, this can't be cured with iron tablets. And so I feel that before the birth, I was carrying the weight of this, thinking, oh, is this going to affect my pregnancy? And that was something I was thinking about. And I have to say that the doctors I worked with, both of them, they were really brilliant in the sense that they did not make a big deal about it. They did not make a big deal about age, any of those things. And that was really important to me, because in fact, what I was told was that every time I would bring it up, every time we sort of thought about home birth, I would bring it up and say, oh, but I have this. Do you think that should be a factor when I consider where to birth? And I was always told that you've had this all your life. So it's not a special condition. Your body knows it, and your body knows birth. So it's not something that you're developing suddenly that's going to impact the birth. Since your body knows how to live with this gene, it's not going to like be a huge factor. And I think that was really true. And now when I look back, I feel that even my decision to really have a doctor at home, it was partly because I had this sort of fear that, oh, I have thal minor, and what if I feel very weak after birth? What if there's a lot of blood loss or something of that sort? But now when I look back, I realize it was more me carrying the weight of it over all these years since my adolescence and growing up, rather than it actually impacting the birth. And I think the doctors really helped, both of them, to not by not making it a big deal, by telling me that my body knows it the way my body knows birth. So I feel that in that sense it was not a high risk option. The way some other things that you may develop over the course of pregnancy, and which your body is also sort of figuring out, maybe. For me, the other little challenge, again in my mind, was that towards the end, I think it was my 8th month or so, that I had, I think I had chikungunya, and I was so afraid. I was thinking that will I be able to have a birth at home with this? And again, what I was told was that your body will tell you, like again, Reba, we spoke, that if your body recovers, then that's it. Like nothing sort of. Birth is not this special thing for the body. Birth is a normal thing for the body. So if your body is functioning normally after whatever you've had, if you've recovered, then the body will go through its normal process of birth. So it's not that the body is going to sort of react differently. That is what. And I feel like I was feeling quite healthy after the chikungunya, after those 5 days spent in a lot of stress. I was feeling fine and healthy. So again, I will not say that this is a standard for everybody. You obviously need to assess how you're feeling, and we also did blood tests to sort of know my blood counts and other levels, and it was all okay. So we felt then it was fine to go ahead with the birth.
Yeah, in so many ways, birth, we say, takes away the conditioning we've lived with all our life. So which is why we call it the rite of passage. And it's incredible how we all grow through those experiences. And one of the other things that also comes to my mind is often the thing we fear the most gets healed. For example, your attachment to thalassemia minor got healed through the process. You realize, oh no, my body is fantastic. I don't bleed out. I am not really low on anything. It's just a condition I'm living with. And yeah, and so your labor started. What week was it?
I think it was, now it feels so far, but it was the final week, the beginning of week 40 for me.
Yeah. And then how did it feel when it started? What were your feelings like? And um,
Yeah, so basically, I was really lucky, I would say, that because Reba lives in a different city, and she amazingly and so graciously, I was not expecting her to come over to another city, and I was not able to imagine how this is going to work out. And we were thinking of whatever online and all that, but I don't think any of it was working for me. And I was also talking to a really wonderful person in Bombay, but because I had that connection with Reba, and I thought it'd be wonderful if she would be there. And she said, "Okay, I will come." And true to her style, she came. And because the thing is, I felt that the baby was going to come sooner, because the baby was really down, and I don't know. I was just really feeling ki bas ho raha hai, ho raha hai, ho raha hai. And I just told Reba, and she's just wonderful. She's like, she just like basically she believed my word. She said, if you feel it's coming soon, it might come soon, so I will come. So she just came. I think she came about 2 weeks before, and of course we were not thinking it'll be 2 weeks. We thought, "Ki abhi kabhi bhi hoga." So she came and she stayed with us. We had like a extra small space, and I think what was again really wonderful for me, and I know that this is not something that's always possible for everybody, because we also have a nuclear setup and it's just me and my partner, and then Riva came and she like we just became friends, and we had so much to chat about and just share and so on. But I feel that for me what really helped was getting to know Reba, because for me again this everything is personalized. Like this is just me as a person, that I find it easier to be fully vulnerable the more I know somebody intimately. So I definitely feel that even if I had somebody in the same city, now when I look back, I feel that just meeting someone 2 3 times over a call or something may not have been the same as actually having my doula live with me for the final 2 weeks. And we were just waiting for the baby, and there were days when we would get a little impatient and be like, oh, we thought it's coming. And I also had a very slow pre-labor. And like I think for days I was experiencing some symptom or the other. And I think it really helped to have my doula with me, and basically waiting with me and not getting impatient, like because she was the one who left things in another city and came and stayed with us. But she was so, I would say she was quite relaxed about it, and she was enjoying it. And she was telling us that, why don't you guys go out for some dates, because you won't have much time once the baby comes. And then yeah, we were just enjoying the final like 3 weeks, which could have been like excruciating wait, and at times it was. But I think it was just wonderful to have that sort of intimate connection with my doula. And then she also knew me and my body patterns and responses so well, so that in the birth I had a very short, I would say short labor. It was, I think, about, I don't remember what time it exactly started, but 5 6 hours, which given the stories I've heard of longer labors, I think it was shorter. But I remember Reba telling me before, because like all moms, like first time moms, you think that, oh please, I want a short labor. And she told me that, but short can be very intense, so be careful about what you ask for. And I think it was an intense labor, like really intense. And of course she will be able to better narrate how it was for her. But I think it was really wonderful also to have her, because I was fully relying on my partner. But I realized that as wonderful as he is, it was his first time also. Like he basically was as new to it. And it was, I felt that it was a little harder for him. And because I was going through it, I was just responding as my body was taking it. But for him, he did not know what was happening. Like, even though in theory he knew, but he sort of didn't experience it. And at the same time, he was seeing someone he loved in a lot of pain. And at times, he just couldn't do anything except watch. So I feel that in that sense also, it really helped to have a doula, to have somebody who was not at the center of the process, but like this very sort of caring boundary she held for us. And I feel that that really, really helped. And I can't imagine going through my labor without my doula. Like, she was amazing, because I don't know, it was just 5 hours of very intense stuff. But she really, and I feel that I understood that that is the real work of a doula, because it was my first time also. I also didn't know what to expect, because this was a completely new person, not a family member or anything. But I realized that somebody who has enough training not to be afraid of the biology. So, in terms of that, enough training of how things unfold and enough self work to really know where they stand in this whole process, what it is to really allow the mother to be at the empowered center of it in practice. I feel that that is the real core of doula work, and I have so much respect for it, like now when I understand it, because it's not really about let me show you breathing exercises or let's make playlists and things that you see online and these videos and I don't know classes. But yeah, I feel like to have the right person really made the difference to my experience, and to know when to pause, to know when to be still, when to be silent, when to not talk, and when to be there. I mean, I think she was really there for me in that.
Yeah, Reba has that energy. Reba was also my doula for the birth. And she just knows when to say the right thing. And she leaves it at, like, she doesn't explain herself. She'll just say it and then you figure it out. And it's just amazing that it fits in your story. And she has that spiritual alignment with things. For example, in your case, she came in 2 days, like 2 weeks before. In my case, I was contemplating, I was thinking my labor is weeks, like maybe a week later or so. And she said, "No, I'm coming." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know if she'll have to wait." But bang on, the time that she arrived, I had my second contraction. And before that, we were thinking maybe it wouldn't even start. I also had Reva. And same 5, 6 hours of intense labor. And after a few hours, I was like, no, I would rather have someone than just my husband around. He was not useful. I needed somebody to now tell me, where am I? What's going on? How? Because it felt to me in my body that I'm close enough. But then I needed somebody to allow me the space to go further because I was holding myself back. And that's when she said, let go. And the same thing that you're saying with Reba, she'll just say it. She's watching you. She's behind you. She's not in your sphere of privacy, which is the space a doula or a midwife should know of. You are not here to coach a woman to birth. You are here to witness her doing it all by herself and come in when you think she just needs, maybe a boundary to just hold on to, and then she will move on. She knows what to do. None of us know what to do. I mean, as us as support people, and I thoroughly resonate with what you're talking about here, and I can go back to the visuals of my own birth in that aspect. And so, moving on to in the ways you birthed, do you want to add something here, Krupa?
No, but I mean, what I am also learning, like now, because we spoke about how we look at the birth after, I do feel that, I mean, that's the thing. When you're a first time mother, you don't even know what you're looking for because you don't know what it is. So what happens is that, I mean, all of us, including me, you kind of end up signing to newsletters and subscriptions, and you whatever, watch a lot of content and fitness for mamas and all kind of things. I'm not saying it's not helpful. It'll help you depending on what you're looking for, but I do feel that after the birth, I now know what doula work is, and in the sense that it is really very similar to a lot of since my background has been in psychology, I feel like a lot of therapeutic work or a lot of healing work, which is so much about being conscious of this other human being with you who's going through a massive life stage, while also being aware of yourself and why are you there and your intention, and sort of constantly having this inward and outward reflection. And and I think that's really is what it is, and it sounds simple, but it's really the profound work, like and I have so much more appreciation of it now, I think.
Yeah, and then when you gave birth, if you could talk about the positions you took so women could visualize that it doesn't have to be lying down. You also had a water birth. So how was that, and how did water help, and what all helped you navigate the pain of labor, the intensity? If yeah, I call it pain nonetheless. I'm like, ठीक है यार, है तो intense है, pain है. It's not the sort of pain we experience when we break a leg, but it is intense, and it is something we can't shy away from. It is intense. And but yeah, yeah, like how would you like help women see they can navigate?
Well, I wish Riba was here. We could have done like a joint conversation because I think that would be nice. So again, we had a birth pool at home, but that's the thing because when we were thinking about it before the birth, I didn't know. I didn't know if I want to give birth in water. Like, because how do you know when, unless you're there, you know? I mean, I can have all kinds of fantasies. Ki, I want to fly in the sky. But only when you're really there, you know what you really, really need. You cannot like pre decide a lot of these things. So we had the options. We had the birth pool, and then I had specifically asked my doctor to also bring me a birth stool because again another colleague and friend Shilpa, she birthed many years ago, but she had told me, and I remember her story, and she said, if you can get a birth stool, think about it because it really helped me. So in my mind I thought, okay, this could be an option, this could be an option. And then we had a mattress and the toilet seat at home, so a mix of it. And then what I realized, like for me, I think a lot of the contractions and dilating happened when I was sitting on the toilet seat, and it was just me and Riba. And I feel that it was the most pain that I had experienced, a different kind of pain that I had experienced. And I was very afraid, because I was afraid of the pain more than the feeling the pain itself. Like I didn't know what this pain could do to me, like because I'd never experienced something like that. And I remember again, of course, I'd seen all those videos on breathing and all of that. It really helped because I was just breathing the way it felt most natural to my body at that time. Again, I mean, I want to say that with the caveat that, see, it's my personality. Like, there are some people who really like to prepare and their life goes as they prepare. Okay, maybe there are that category of people. I am not that. Like, for me, a lot of it in life has always been spontaneous and about really responding to the moment. And there are times in life when I decide on something and I change my mind last minute because it's not feeling right in that moment. And Reba understood it because she's a similar, I think, character in that sense. So I feel that that was necessary to really have that open space and not say, okay, we've done these exercises, let's start doing them or something. And all I wanted to navigate that pain was to have somebody tell me that this pain is not going to kill me, like it's going to pass. That's all I wanted to hear, that it's going to pass and it's going to be okay. And I think I just asked Reba, can you please say this to me? And then she just said it. And the beauty is that she's, I don't know if she's trained in theater or not, but she really has different ways of using voice, intonation, and so on. So she was her most gentle, soothing, but also assertive self, trying to be my voice and tell me that, it's going to be okay, don't worry, it's going to be okay, this pain will pass. And that's all I needed to get through a very, very intense phase of really hearing that it's going to be okay, and holding her hand. And then I know that there was a pause for me, and I moved out, and after which I had this again, I wanted to push. And a lot of these things I had read about, but honestly I feel that this is something I'll tell to all first time moms: just don't worry if all the technicalities don't really sink in, because it can't until you're a medical student maybe or whatever. But until you experience it, it's hard for you to imagine ki, don't push too much, don't do this, don't do that, like those 50 advices you get. It's very hard to even remember the advice. Like for me, I know that it was a very natural urge to push, and I wanted the stool because I was on my back because I had a lot of back pain in that pause. But I the moment I wanted to push, I wanted the force of gravity and I wanted to sit. And I just told, Yaurapam and my husband and Reba that I want to sit. And by then, the doctor had also come and she got the stool just at the right time. And and then I mean, they suggested that if I want, I can move into the water. So again, this is something I remember that I did try going into the water during my labor, but it was not at all relaxing for me. Maybe because I don't know, I have had some difficulty learning swimming as a child, and I was having all these memories because the water was up till here, and I was really afraid that I'm going to drown in the middle of that pain. So, I mean, it was just not comfortable. Like, I was not able to relax in water during my labor. But then when I was pushing out, I felt that there was so much stretch that I wanted something more soothing around me. And then I stepped into the water just to push the baby out, and it was really helpful. Like, it helped me relax much more, and actually it was very quick, and it was also very natural. Again, like a lot of women who've given birth will say that it's almost like you poop out the baby when you feel the urge. You don't have to push, and you don't need somebody else to tell you to push. That's like, I don't understand. I mean, I know that a lot of women go through it, but now when I look back, I don't understand how somebody else would have known when to push, because I felt it in my body so strongly that I could not have pushed at other times. There are only very specific intervals of contraction when you feel the urge to push. And I pushed twice, I think thrice, and then the baby was out, uh, and it was not painful. I mean, even the ring of fire and whatever I had read about it, I remember the sharp pain just before the baby came out, but it was not as horrendous as I had read or heard.
Yeah. One of the things with pushing, I remember you remind me of a very recent experience with a mom where she was pushing hours before the baby was born. But she had this urge to bear down. And she was bearing down really gently. But she was pushing. And the doctors came in and they said, "Are you pushing?" I'm like, "No, she's not pushing." Because had I told them that she's pushing, and she was really working with the contractions, it wasn't pushing, but she was working with her contractions. It was very gentle. It wouldn't have hurt the baby, wouldn't have hurt her perineum at all. But had I told the doctors, they would have stopped her from doing what she naturally felt like doing. And it was because of her working with her contractions the way her body told her to. She had her baby again, like 5 hours, 6 hours. She had her baby, and doctors were amazed how quickly it happened, and the heartbeat did not dip at all because, of course, they hadn't done any intervention. So, in so many ways, they were amazed that okay, this can happen. And at one point, the husband looked at me, and he could feel that she was pushing because the belly went down, and he was trying to squeeze her buttocks, and I had to nod and tell him, no, it's not going to hurt. So yeah, we don't want women coached in labor and birth. They most of the times they know what they're doing if they are allowed to just work with it. If they don't have any, if they're not coached, I mean, they will again. I'll have some room for different experiences. There might be a place where you need to stop a woman from forcefully pushing, but majority of the times women have that innate urge to, just how a baby knows when to poop and pee and exert pressure, and they just know what to do, how to poop. Human bodies know how to push the babies out, and like you were saying, it was for you it was 2-3 pushes. For this mother it was consistent gentle pushing. For me it was one push and the head was down in the yoni, and that for me the ring of fire was very uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than the contractions itself, because I could move with the contractions. Now with this weird feeling of head in the yoni, I didn't know what to do with that feeling, because I didn't feel any more intense pains because the pains were not intense anymore. But that feeling of something in my yoni was really uncomfortable. It was, it was weird. It was something sitting there. I can feel like sitting and pinching there. That's what I remember. So women feel labor and birth so differently, and it's each one's own very unique way of birthing, and also very um, unique to way the baby is. Maybe different labors feel very different for the very mother, and she might go through different channels of herself during labor and birth. So on to pushing, like you were saying, I don't know how women are asked to push, told to push, when to push, when they don't feel like it. It becomes such a disconnected experience, wherein it can be such an empowering experience to do it all by yourself. I did it, I figured it out, my body did it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm also thinking you're right, and also the other sort of important thing is about the positions, right? Again, it's impossible for me now to even understand how women are expected to give birth on, beds and stretchers and so on, because it's such an uncomfortable and anti-gravity position. I don't know, maybe sometimes I know that I was in that position for a little bit because I wanted rest for my back. But the moment you're pushing, I mean, you need the force of gravity, and the stool, like for me, I wanted the stool even inside the water pool, because that is what helped me push. And so I really am I'm sort of thinking that it's really for like the convenience sometimes of the clinicians and people around, that the patient is at a certain height, and there's a certain angle to your vision. And sadly, like how medical science has developed, everything we know has been developed from the perspective of the white male doctor. And in India, it becomes again the upper caste male doctor, and everyone else sort of takes after them and follows the same methods and so on. And it's really sad, because birthing in a sitting position is so much more comfortable, and also that it's not so alternate. I realized that because over the course of this, I figured that there are so many, like the birthing stool was really a part of a lot of I don't want to say Indian homes, but what I want to say is that it had a place in our culture and in many cultures across the world, where women are in charge of handling or helping with birth. That the birthing stool is actually a very common piece of furniture in traditional homes and so on. Like, so in that sense, it's really sad that it has been replaced by this really sad stretcher, and you have to sit on it and whatever, offer yourself for a comfortable view for those around you. And that's really, yeah, I mean, for me, I know that that's not what I wanted. And not just my discomfort with it, but now that I have gone through the process of birth, I feel like, yeah, I feel that the position really matters, because that is how you feel in control of the body. You feel in control of what's happening. So, yeah. The other thing, I mean, because I'm also sort of tying it up to some of the earlier questions you asked in terms of preparation and all. The one thing I have learned through my birth is that, again, because birth has become such an industry, everyone from the alternative space to the mainstream to everyone in between has things to offer, from breath work to ABC to everything. But what I really feel that for me, the single most thing that helped the most was not during the pregnancy, was actually before, where I have trained in movement practice, and I have trained with Navteej Johar. He's a yoga teacher and somatics teacher, and one of the most wonderful teachers I've had. I've trained in dance, again with an incredibly autonomous teacher. Like, she allowed us to move in ways that felt right to our body, because I feel that what really helps you in that moment is a body knowledge that this body belongs to me. And the way we live in our societies generationally through colonial experiences, gendered experiences, caste experiences, we are systematically told that the body doesn't belong to you. You are supposed to walk in a certain way, you're supposed to sit in a certain way, depending on whether you're a woman, you're somebody from the oppressed caste, if you are from a colonized country. So we have been instructed so much about our bodies that I feel that the biggest struggle is that most of us feel very natural in the medical system. And the reason why we feel this the natural in the medical system is because our bodies have, even before we encounter a health situation, our bodies have ingrained this idea that this is not fully mine, that this it's okay, like there are other people who can basically instruct me. So sometimes in schools it is the teacher telling you how to sit, how to walk, what to do. Or it's also the society telling you women should not go out at a particular time, women should walk in a certain way, don't sit with your legs open, and blah blah blah. If of course if you belong to an oppressed caste, you're always told that you should not come here, you should not sit here, whatever. So I feel that the real work for me, I feel, again, because also I have a background in like social sciences and so on, is the real work is claiming autonomy over our body. And the work begins much before we give birth, much before we even get pregnant. And that is what helps, like, because it's not going to come to you in that moment unless you have lived experience of this autonomy for several months or years in your life. And uh, and I have to also say that it's not that if there are women around you will automatically feel more in charge of your body. The other thing is, women are also trained to speak in a very patriarchal language. They are also trained to instruct, advise, criticize, judge, constantly, so sometimes even your family members ke saath, like the women, so to say, you don't feel as comfortable. And it's not because they're not well intentioned, it's because they themselves don't know the language of autonomy in their own body. So they don't know how to sort of facilitate that autonomy for anyone else. So in that sense, I feel that again, sort of tying it up to the birth doula also, is I feel that for me, I was lucky with you and Reba that to have women who understood the concept of autonomy within their own bodies, and then they could understand it, for me as well. So I feel that that is the preparation that's needed. And of course, it can't be sold on YouTube or Instagram and all, because it's real work and it needs like lots of learning. But if anyone's listening to it and wants to think about it, I feel that I would learn, I don't know, anything that allows me, like contemporary dance or whatever, just something that really allows you to claim autonomy of your body, to know that this is your body, you decide how to move and nobody else. Because that is what helps you feel confident in your body's ability to give birth at when it matters the most.
That's such a unique take, Krupa, on people feeling safe when instructed a certain way. So I've heard stories about women wanting somebody to tell them what to do. They were scared of owning their own bodies, even when they knew that my body needs me to do this. And we all go through this, but to come back to, okay, I can do this, or to have someone like Reba tell, okay, go back in. You're coming out of yourself, go back in. So it's such a unique take, and love that very practical advice of starting to take on forms that help you get in touch with your own self, so you know when it's not right. You can, like, it becomes second nature. You don't have to think through, you don't have to take classes and breathing and all of that, and 10 times of breathing. I mean, it's you're going to get entangled in those breathing techniques throughout your labor and think that, okay, maybe something else will work for me. And at one point even I did that, because I knew that although I don't teach that anymore, I don't teach breathing techniques, but there was one point I thought that probably I breathe differently, I'll be able to feel it less. And that's when Reba said, the way you're stopping yourself, don't. She just said that, and I was like, damn, yes, I'm doing that. I don't have to fish for anything. Why am I fishing for any tool? I don't have to. I have to go back to myself. That's why I let out a big roar. And that's when I pushed, because I was stopping myself from pushing, because I probably didn't want to go to the next intensity, which actually did, like, the intensity reduced from thereafter. But that feeling of maybe it's gonna go further beyond that. So it's incredible. Thank you, Krupa, for bringing that very unique point, um, for the listeners. And then you gave birth in the waters, and also very wonderful of like having the stool in, so people heard you, allowed you to have that stool in, because a lot of the times when we have this water birthing techniques and tactics, and all the entire learning about water birthing, maybe about infection safety. We do not allow women to be in the waters the way they might want to. For example, with me, my waters had broken, but all of that was sterile. I wanted to be in the waters. I cannot imagine giving birth without water. But had I been in the hospital with a water birth facility, extremely expensive, they would have taken me out or not allowed me to get into the waters. That's the beauty of autonomy with observation, knowing that there is risk, but when is it a real risk? When is it preventive? And when is it becoming overpowering your birth experience, the way you'll experience birth versus the risk? So the risk was lower for me, and the benefit was more to be in the waters and to allow that stool to go in. That would have not happened in a hospital. And one of the things my teacher used to say, when you go to a person's house, the rule is there. It's a subconscious switch on. You are no longer the authority in their house. So even if a doctor comes home, they will still be listening to you because this is your house. They're coming to provide a service. Versus if you go to their territory, their den. In a hospital, they might be a very different person. All of this is so subconscious. Nobody is thinking about it, but it's happening in real. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true, Divya, because absolutely, I feel like these things are more subconscious and sort of at times also non-verbal. Like that is the real thing, and there's so much of tension around power and autonomy in this entire birth setup. And sometimes I feel like the doctor doesn't even ask for it, but because we are schooled in this system where aapko sab pata hai, bachpan se we have gone to doctors to know what is wrong with us. The moment we have a doctor, it can happen that we just surrender all autonomy and feel ki acha ab to ye batayenge. I was very lucky, and I will say that because this is what I liked about my doctor. I mean, yes, we can like talk about more details about the steps and what did the doctor do and all. But I think what was important is for me, what really worked was as a personality. I have a feeling that she is very light, like not somebody who takes it too seriously, because I know that the moment somebody comes with that sort of very serious self of I know what to do. I also, being the younger child in the house and all of that, I also am very sort of okay, so you will tell me what to do. Very subconsciously that power exchange can happen. And what I really like about her as a personality, and so with Riba, not light but still not crossing, like you mentioned, like crossing the boundary into your intimate space. Like basically I feel like, especially with my doctor, that there's something very light about her which I liked, that she could say something and I felt that I could say no to it. Like just that sense of feeling, I didn't have to say no. I trusted her word on most things, and I thought she had seen many birds, but just that feeling of whatever she's saying came to me much more gently, like something that I could consider and take my call. So I was still in charge, and that was important for me. And like you said, the space absolutely matters, because it's the home that, like in our case, for example, again, it'll be different for different people, because ours is a nuclear setup. That's really the home that we have made. Like it's my home, my rules, my kitchen, everything. So and we don't like share it with also more family members, because then again your sense of space changes. So it's also about choosing what is this exact space you want to give birth in, because where you feel you're most at yourself, and with the power that you inherently have. You're not claiming to dominate anybody or anything. This is who you are. Like your body is doing something. So where does it feel most at ease? So for me it was the home and the way it happened.
That's another very nuanced layer that you've brought to limelight, the power exchange. And I was telling Reba at one point, I don't know whether, when I was discussing with her whether I should have somebody in person or not, one of the things that I had realized that in front of an authority, I have to really muster a lot of courage to not do something subconsciously that I'm asked to. Maybe I don't want to, but it takes a second for me to come back to myself and say, okay, no. I did it because I was courteous. That's my first nature. I would give space to someone else, hear them first, and then decide. Maybe it's a good trait, but at the same time, you can be very vulnerable, during labor and birth, and that's also when I knew it can only be Reba if it has to be. It will be nobody else. So because I know, if I don't want her in the space, she will very happily be outside, sitting there. And if I need her, she'll be there. If I need to say something, I can tell her, and I I will not be feeling that I'm offending her, because she, like you're saying, was is very light, is also the matriarchal figure. She becomes that mother, who gently nudges you, and without making you feel bad about it. So this, which is why birth needs privacy, which is why birth needs that space for women to unfold in their wildest form, because birth is wild, birth is natural. And if a hospital and a doctor provides you that, where you can be your wild self, and if your partner can give you that protection, absolutely. This mother in the hospital, her partner was a lion. He was like, out, you nurse out. Not a second he allowed anybody in. And when they took birth classes, I wasn't sure this is going to happen. Two very young people in the room, hardly saying anything, hardly asking any questions, but doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And then in the room, he was a lion. Even before I could say to the nurse, you need to go out, he was like, out, not in. And he was there protecting her fiercely. And if and again, like, to each their own, like you're saying, it can be different ways, but the fundamental is, you have that space, you have that autonomy.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what it's also coming to me is that basically power is really important in this whole equation, because the way biology and nature is designed, the mother is at the center of power because she is the one giving birth. So any situation that alters that significantly, I feel that I mean, according to me, that's not the best setup, because it's altering, and that's the natural birth. The naturalness of birth is to let the woman take charge, because it is her taking charge that's what's bringing the baby in this world. And I feel that it's not so much about whether it's a home birth or where birthing center, or because we spend a lot of time thinking about these things, but the question really is, where do you feel the most safe? And for me, that also translates into, what is the space where I can say no very easily when I don't like something? So it could also be a relationship. Like, I know I can tell my partner no, and I don't have to think about the tone, I don't have to think about anything in that moment. I know that I don't have to care for somebody after saying a no, which is what happens in a medical setup, because you want to say no, but you're also finding the right words and sounding polite without hurting their ego and all of that. But for a lot of people, I can imagine that it can also happen with, if you're living with more people in the house, the space is shared, and sometimes some family members, want to be around in a joint family or such setup. What I'm saying is that it's not that the home is always the safest place for a person, because sometimes what happens is that we start defining what's safe, instead of saying that let's go for a birth where the woman is at the center and she is in her power. And that's what birth needs to be. It becomes about home birth is better or hospital birth, but it's really about assessing which system is the one where you will fully own your power as a birthing mother.
Yeah, also where physiology can take precedence. And with respect to these joint family setups, I most of the times my work uh, at a birth is to ensure that the other women don't enter in, because they want to do better, they want to check in, they're scared, they have this caring, but the mother doesn't want to be seen, she really wants everybody out. And you have a different dynamic with everybody. So sometimes mother-in-laws come in and they're sitting there praying in front of the woman laboring, and she's looking at me, get her out. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get her out. And I have to. And this is also some of the things I learned in the process, how to confront, which is also something that I've learned in the process, how to confront and say, okay, you need to go out. And I have that power. I can say that to an elder, you need to go out because she needs this space now, and absolutely gently, maybe give them some work. So sometimes I ask them to bring in something, stay outside. Oh, I need this. Oh, and I need you to do this. Maybe make something. So inventing creative ways to do this. But you're right, where a woman can have her own space is absolutely, absolutely important. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Krupa, before we kind of wrap this up, is did you have any stitches, anything towards like after you gave birth?
Uh, no, I had a small tear, but then basically I did not need a
Wonderful.
stitch, and then it recovered. It obviously took a while,
Recovered.
but it
Yeah.
recovered. So yeah,
Yeah.
that
Reason why
was.
I asked is because everybody thinks with vaginal birth there has to be stitching and there has to be a cut, which is also another myth that's out there that you need a cut. You don't need a cut if you're giving birth.
Yeah, even I thought so. And I was also quite afraid. In fact, sometimes I feel more than the labor, I was afraid of somebody stitching me up. But I do feel that, of course, it'll be different with every birth. In my case, what really helped was that I was, in general, not pushing when I didn't feel the need for it. And that really helped. Also, what helped is putting some coconut oil, around the vaginal area just before I was going to give birth, because I did feel the burning sensation and so on. So that helped. And I remember the doctor suggesting it, because we are here talking about the doctor being this figure of medical science. And so it's not really that. I feel that once we work as a team and when we recognize that the woman is at the center, then everybody sort of finds their little way to at the edge, in different ways, trying to help. So she was the one suggesting, and which I thought was a great idea, to put some oil, which would help and not give me a tear. Also, going into the water for the final push, I think all of it helped, and yeah, and all these suggestions by everyone there helped. So I feel like in that sense. Yeah, I like that image of the birthing mother in the center, and then everyone has a role. It's not like you're doing it alone. Everyone's contributing, but then they know their space and they know their boundaries. They are not overarching. That's what's important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this technique that you spoke about putting oil around a woman's perineum is also some of the things that midwives do. They carry. So my teacher used to carry castor oil with her. So if she would see the perineum stretching, she would ask the mother gently to, you know, have. Or some mothers don't like to be touched. Some of them would be like, okay, I don't want anything. With some mothers, she'd ask and she'd be like, okay, but she'd have everybody have 100 ml of fresh castor oil, sesame oil, not castor oil, sesame oil bottle. So she could use that for lubrication and elasticity around the perineum when it's stretching. So these are some simple midwifery techniques. My teacher used to say it's common sense. And it's not that as common. I would say I cannot think of any of this unless, I've been taught. But it's incredible how these techniques can help birth become far more simple, less um, traumatic in so many ways. And yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I also feel that sometimes, again, like you're saying, no, because what happens is I have noticed that some of these become those lists. Like, I mean, of course, some lists are there. You will have to do some prep, but then there are also extensive lists available which will tell you this oil and this and that, and all of that you need for the most natural, unique, whatever experience. But I feel that not everything is going to work. We also need to sort of know that it's not like you're going to a shopping mall and you're going to buy everything. Like, you will only know what you need in that moment. So maybe in that moment we need something, and it's good if somebody around has the wit and the observation to know that, "Acha, she's going through this, she needs this, let's get it quickly." That helps. But even if it's not there, it's not the most important thing. I would think that the birth, like what we spoke about, the whole process and all that, that's the center. These other things, generally, I feel that they take care of itself. If the center is sort of taken care of. That's been my experience, and that's how I kind of look back at it
no,
now.
absolutely, Krupa. That is
Yeah.
one of the things that a lot of people have started talking about, that your physical space has less to do with birth than your mental space. So anything that upholds and ensures that your mental space is taken care of, you'll be able to give birth and beautifully and wonderfully. But I do want to talk about how was the placenta birth, and then how did you bury the placenta, or what did you do with the placenta, and how was that experience like? Because many of us, like I was talking to my mother-in-law, she did not know what a placenta is. She gave birth vaginally twice, thrice in the hospital, but she had never seen her placenta, so she didn't know what that is. uh, so how was your placenta birth, and how much time it took for it to come out?
Well, again, it sort of happened, like it didn't come out immediately on its own, and that's where I feel that having Reba helped, because she suggested, why don't you walk a little bit to your room, something of that sort. But that movement helped, and I mean, it was just like a plop, like a tiny contraction, and it came out, and it was almost full. And so that's where having a doula helped, because we were so overwhelmed with the birth that I don't think I had the mental capacity to even think ki kya kare, kahan rakhe, and all of that. So it helped, because we had told her that we would like to, bury this in our village in Manipur. That's where my husband's from, and we have a home, and we feel connected to that place. So we just had to store it, and Reba helped sort of store it for us in a freezer. And uh, yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of my preparation was just about the labor and the birth, and I was not able to personally think of what after birth. So it's something we had decided that we want to have the placenta, but I feel that I was not so invested in it as I was in the labor and birth. But that's just me, because I was really occupied with this big thing. So yeah, but it was beautiful. It was beautiful to take the placenta back, and then and also to see it, like it has such a beautiful imprint. That is something I feel that it really has the imprint of flowers, and that's when you realize how all life is the same, because the patterns and imprints and all, they are all the same. So we are made of the same, like they say, stardust that makes the plants and the trees and the insects and the birds, and you can see it in the design of the placenta in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Placenta is called the tree of life because it looks like a tree. Has these, and with the imprint, like you spoke about, usually some mums or some parents want the imprint. Of course, they don't remember it. Once the baby is here, you don't care about the placenta. I didn't care about the placenta so much, so I forgot taking an imprint of the placenta. And later, when I couldn't take the imprint of the placenta, I was like, oh damn, I didn't take the imprint of the placenta. I wanted that. And so yeah, like you're saying, of course, once the baby is here, you all your energy is with the baby, and you spend time with the baby. And I'm sure that must have been a surreal. How was your husband's reaction to when the your baby was here and she was born? And
So the beautiful thing was that because I was in that moment where I just wanted to get done with it, so I was not really thinking about, oh, the baby's coming, who's going to hold, and all of that. But he was there, and he and the doctor, they both sort of took her the moment she came, and it was beautiful. I mean, he remembers it really well. All I remember is, okay, finally it's done. And it took me a while to sort of see her, and then, like, obviously it takes a while, but for him it was really, I think, beautiful, from what he's told me, to be able to see the birth, like not just the baby coming, but the whole process. And it's sort of and I have to say, I think he's unlike, like, of course I have not seen more husbands in during birth, but he's unlike many other people who may feel afraid, or who may have a certain I don't know, undiscussed with icky things and stuff like that. He's not one of those at all. So he was I feel I was really blessed in that sense, that he was really okay with everything and cleaning up. And so this is one thing I will definitely say, which I didn't know when I was having a home birth, is that the one, let me not say disadvantage, but something that you need to think when you're having a home birth is, like in our case, basically after the birth there's a lot of cleaning up to do, especially if it's a water birth or whatever, and everybody's tired, not just the mother, everyone else. And I feel like what happens in hospitals is the work of the nurses and peons just goes unnoticed, because doctor hai, birth ho gaya, khatam. Now who's going to dispose all those bed sheets, wash them, clean them? So at home you need to do that yourself. So obviously I couldn't do it, and my husband did it, and I feel that it was really tiring because he was also tired with the birth. He woke up at the same time. He was going through the same anxieties in many ways. And then he was just literally scrubbing the floors and cleaning the house after the baby was born. And I think that is something we had not thought of. So now, if somebody is going for a home birth, I would tell them that, get some backup help who can come and scrub the floors and, just pack the tissues in the garbage bin and those little things. But they are tiring. Yeah.
Yeah, they are definitely tiring. I remember a foreign couple who went to a hospital and told them, "Don't come in, we'll birth our baby. You are not required. You only needed to clean after. We are not having this baby at home this time because we don't want to do the cleaning." That was the reason they went to this nursing home. And because they were foreign nationals, of course, we have this, white people. You look at the white person and you're like, okay, whatever you want to do. But with an Indian, we'll use all our power to say, okay, you do it our way. So yeah, they had that edge and they could birth their baby the way their way, in a nursing home. So that's an important point.
Again, what it tells us is how, again, we're talking about the colonial and the medical sort of system, which only sees the doctor as the in charge or whatever of this system. But even within that system, the main work is done by the nurses who come and keep checking your contractions, and the peons and everybody around who's doing the hard labor, and not just the doctor who's coming at the final sort of moment. So it's, yeah, I mean, that's also the coloniality of the system, right? You give credit to just this one degree holding expert, and everybody
Doctor,
else's
yeah.
work is sort of invisibilized.
Yeah, it's most of the times the entire birth is used to be taken care of by nurses. Doctors used to come towards the end to
Yeah.
just sign it up. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's food for thought for everybody listening to this episode, that you'll have to do the work, and then it's the nurses and other people who are going to help you with it. So why not choose your own team which aligns with you and your idea and vision of birth? And maybe while listening to this episode, you do not know, you don't have an idea of birth. So birth classes really help in that aspect too. You wouldn't know everything 100% because the experience is there for that reason, but you would know enough for you to be able to arrive at the decisions you need to take at the right time. So yeah, thank you so much, Kripa, for doing this with us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to now look back and think of all of these things. That, of course, it was very different. I mean, the questions were the same, but then you approach it with a different anxiety, and you approach it now with a different space. So I'm grateful for this opportunity also. And I have to tell you, Divya, before we end, that I was so anti podcast. I remember telling Reba that I'm never going to do a podcast on my birth. Because I don't want to, like, I don't want to convince other people to give a home birth or whatever, because I had also come across a lot of people who in the alternative space are a little pushy at times, telling you to opt for alternative stuff. But what I have realized over the course is that it's valuable to hear different stories, not because you need to copy them, but to know that there are all these options and then you choose your own. And in that sense, I feel that podcasts and hearing stories helps, because then you know that there are options. It's a plural world, where if you people different people think of safety, power, autonomy, birth differently, and then you choose your own. Thank you for letting me share that story, and I hope it reaches somebody who needs to hear it, like a lot of other stories reached me, but I needed to hear them.
Yeah, and you've kind of made this entire conversation full circle by adding that towards the end. And thank you so much. I loved every bit of this nuance conversation. Thank you so much for your time. There is a field beyond fear where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.
Starting a podcast with poor recording tools in the market? It was painful until I found Zencaster. Its high quality audio and video recording, along with the option of a backup, makes it super sturdy and a savior at times. With an easy to use dashboard and super convenient tools for advertising campaigns such as reels and videos, Zencaster is my comfort choice. Go to zencaster.com/pricing and use my code BIRTHAGNI, BIRTHAGNI, and you will get 30% off of your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. You may also explore their free hobbyist plan to begin with.